Hello and welcome. This is Talking Jobs with me, Rbromnick. So welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the wonderful things you can do with a psychology degree. It's such a brilliant subject to study. It's so fascinating. I love psychology, but it can also take you into a whole host of different career opportunities. So stay tuned and we'll find out what some of those are. Just before I start, I'm going to tell you a story. So I was at a dinner party at my sister's, and you get chatting to people, some of whom you know, some of whom you don't really know. And I was sat next to a couple of people. People always ask you, what do you do? So I told them what I did. And the woman who I was talking to was called Helen Stone. And she told me that she was a retired engineer. I thought, wow, that's interesting. I mean, I know it's a bit sexist. It's just women don't tend to be engineers. And she told me that her story, and what happened with her was when she was about 10, her parents had taken her to see the opening of the M1 motorway. And she'd been captivated by this industry, and ever since that moment she'd become determined to be a civil engineer, and that is indeed what she went on to do. And then on my other side there was a chap called Peter, who was an actor, so someone very different again, and it's called Peter Elliott, and he became the country, if not the world's leading primate impersonator. So oh my God, so interesting. And of course for Peter, although he became like the industry's go-to primate, it had never been his ambition to be a gorilla impersonator or even an actor. Just turned out he had aptitude in that area and opportunities, and his career unfolded in a way that he never would have thought. So there was the three of us, the engineering lady who was completely focused on something and had built her career in that way. Some of you listening might be like that. You've chosen psychology for a particular reason. I think the vast majority of you will be more like me. I sort of wanted to do something useful, maybe something in health or education, and ended up where I did. But certainly at the time of my undergraduate, I didn't know where that might be. So let's look at some of the things you can do with a psychology degree. I'm going to separate that into jobs where you absolutely have to have a psychology degree. I'm going to also talk about jobs and careers where psychology might be a useful background, and I'm going to talk about jobs that are open to all graduates and focus on the ones that I think psychology students might be particularly interested in. So let's start with the jobs requiring a psychology degree. So nationally, about 10 or 15% of psychology graduates will work as a psychologist. These are in roles that have chartered status with the British Psychological Society. And if you go onto the BPS website, they've got a really nice little interactive tool, and you can click on these different options to find out more about what those professions involve and the sorts of training routes that you need to pursue. So I'm going to group them into two sort of main groups. So there's sport and exercise psychology, forensic psychology, occupational psychology, and health psychology. And those careers, they tend to be accredited at master's level. So you'll get some experience, you can do the master's, and then you go on to do more specialist level 2 training once you've done your master's. Many of them will take you straight from undergraduate if you've got some relevant volunteering or work experience. So that's sport and exercise, forensic, occupational and health. And then there's a set that include clinical, with some people do neuropsych speciality, educational psychology. Then there's the academic route, which I pursued, and there's also counselling psychology. So clinical, educational, academic and counselling. And for those routes, they're accredited at doctoral level. And typically, people will need to get experience before getting onto the doctorate. So have a look at the BPS website. You can see what you need, and also listen for some more of these recordings, because we're going to be looking at some of the more popular ones and giving some hints and tips. So those are the routes where you need a psychology degree. The vast majority, therefore, of psychology graduates, whilst their degree is not being used directly, they're going to use their subject knowledge and their skills. So we talk about psychological literacy, where you maybe apply psychology to other workplace or personal issues, and also all those skills that you've learnt on the degree about report writing, data handling, critical thinking, problem solving, can obviously be used in all kinds of different work. So I'm going to talk now about some postgraduate vocational courses where psychology might be a relevant background. You can go on from psychology to do nurse training. You can work in adult or mental health, or with disability, or with children. The mental health nursing route as a postgraduate opportunity is obviously very popular with some psychology students. You can also go on to train to be a doctor. There's a fast track route into medicine, and there are some courses where you don't have to specify your degree subject, such as the programme at Warwick, and we've had students go on to be GPs and psychiatrists and so forth. There's also some of the rehab sciences that appeal to a number of our graduates. So you can become an occupational therapist, or a speech and language therapist, or even a physiotherapist. Occupational therapy in particular is a fantastic rehab career where you work helping individuals reach their potential, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that more in a separate recording, because you can specialise in mental health as well. Speech and language therapy, where you'll be using your cognition, maybe working with children with autism or helping people following a stroke. These are all postgraduate opportunities you can consider. There's also teaching, and that of course is very popular with a number of different graduates. You're best to look on the government website, because there's different routes into teaching. Some people will do the graduate scheme Teach First, some people will do Schools Direct programme or PGCE, and you might use that in fact as a springboard onto educational psychology, or just work as a career in teaching. A number of our graduates who are teachers have actually taken specialist roles within schools working in mental health, because that's, demand sadly at the moment for schools. And there's another career to consider, which is social work. So social work, you may specialise with elderly people or with children, or again there's a mental health specialist route. So all of those programmes have postgraduate entry. You might want to consider graduate schemes that are open to students from all kinds of different backgrounds. So I mentioned Teach First. There's also Frontline for social work, Police Now, Think Ahead, which is mental health social work. There's the Civil Service Fast Track stream. That's popular for people who are interested in doing sort of policy research or data-driven jobs. It's well remunerated, and you can go through that graduate scheme. There's also graduate schemes with the NHS for those of you that aren't so keen on the sort of frontline healthcare, but you want to sort of work in a organisation that you value. So the NHS management scheme, for example, they take on people to work in their human resources department, or people who work in health analysis rather than sort of healthcare. And there's schemes abroad, such as working in Japan on the JETS scheme. So a whole range of different things there you can do for psychology. Now you might think I'm going to say to you now, well, what you have to do is decide. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, be open to these different opportunities. If you are like that engineering lady and you came to psychology with a very specific career route in mind, then, you know, check out the latest information. Make sure you're building up your CV with experience and volunteering in the right sort of areas. If you were a bit more like me and you were completely sort of open to general, useful, helpful careers, you know, don't feel you have to decide at this stage what it is you absolutely have to do. A number of our graduates are doing work where the job title isn't something you might have thought of. So we've got graduates who are outreach workers, mental health recovery workers, performance officer, interventions facilitator. These are all work with mental health, working in the community. So look for jobs that don't always have kind of standard titles. And then I mentioned to you at the start about the guy who became the gorilla impersonator, and that's my final sort of bit of advice to you, is just to be open to opportunities. You know, you might develop talents in areas that you never thought you had. So that's a really quick overview. You've been listening to Talking Jobs with Rachel Bromnick. Get in touch if you want to find out more or with any questions I can help with. Thanks everyone. Bye.